Commander Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the Grand Council chamber. The massive room stretched high above her, its walls made of crystal that reflected the light of 1,000 stars. Around her sat representatives from 50 different alien species. They whispered to each other, their strange voices mixing together like a confusing song. At the front of the chamber, Emperor Zeltherax sat on his golden throne. He was tall even sitting down. His skin was purple and covered in scales that caught the light. His four eyes stared down at Elena without blinking. Behind him stood his advisors, all wearing long red robes that touched the floor. Elena had been called here without warning. One moment she was in her office reviewing trade reports. The next moment, Imperial guards were escorting her to this chamber. She wore her uniform with pride. The blue jacket had medals on the chest, each one earned through years of service. On her shoulder was the patch of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. On her other shoulder was a special symbol, a silver star wrapped in olive branches. It marked her as humanity's chief military liaison. Commander Elena Vasquez, the Emperor's voice boomed through the chamber. He did not need a microphone. His voice was naturally loud and deep. You have served in this position for 30 years. Yes, Your Majesty, Elena said. Her voice was calm and steady even though her heart was beating fast. 30 years of peace between our peoples, the Emperor continued. The treaty signed by your ancestor has held strong. Elena felt a small bit of relief. Maybe this was a ceremony. Maybe they were going to give her an award. She had just helped negotiate a new trade agreement between human colonies and Zarathi mining operations. Perhaps they wanted to thank her. However, the Emperor said, and Elena's relief vanished, the Council has decided that your services are no longer required. The chamber went silent. Even the whispers stopped. Elena felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. Your Majesty? She asked. I don't understand. Have I done something wrong? One of the Emperor's advisors stepped forward. He was an old Zarathi with silver scales and a bent back. You have done nothing wrong, human. But the natural order must be restored. A female, especially a human female, should not hold such a position of authority. It disturbs the balance of things. Elena's hands formed into fists at her sides. She wanted to yell. She wanted to tell them how stupid and unfair this was, but she stayed calm. She had been trained for situations like this. The human ambassador, Marcus Chen, jumped to his feet. He was an older man with gray hair and worry lines on his face. Your Majesty, please. You can't do this. Commander Vasquez isn't just any officer. She is the last living member of the Vasquez bloodline. We are aware of her heritage, the Emperor said with a wave of his large hand. But it means nothing to us. It means everything, Marcus shouted. Other ambassadors tried to quiet him, but he kept talking. The treaty isn't just words on paper. Article 7, Clause 3, the Compact of Blood and Stars. As long as a Vasquez descendant commands humanity's forces, the treaty holds. Remove her and you break the seal. The Zarathi advisors laughed. It was an ugly sound like metal scraping against stone. Superstition, one of them said. Old words from a more primitive time. We don't believe in your human magic. Elena spoke quietly, but everyone heard her. It's not magic. It's a promise. A very old promise. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. What promise? 700 years ago, humanity and the Zarathi Empire fought a war, Elena said. It was brutal. Billions died on both sides. My ancestor, Admiral Maria Vasquez, met with your ancestor, Emperor Zeltherax the Wise. They made a treaty, but your ancestor was worried. He had seen what humans could do in war. He was afraid that one day humans would forget the cost of peace and start fighting again. She took a deep breath. So my ancestor made a promise. As long as someone from her bloodline commanded humanity's military, they would keep the peace. It was a blood oath. A guarantee. For 700 years, my family has kept that promise. We've been the lock on humanity's weapons, the seal on their anger. And what happens when we break this seal? The Emperor asked. He sounded amused, like Elena was telling him a funny story. Elena looked him straight in the eyes. All four of them. You don't want to find out, Your Majesty. The Emperor laughed. We have 10 million warships. We control 1,000 worlds. If humanity wants war, they will lose. We don't want war, Elena said softly. We never wanted war. That's why we made the treaty. Then there is no problem, the Emperor said. You are dismissed from service, Commander Vasquez. Return to your homeworld. We will assign a new liaison officer tomorrow. 2 guards walked toward Elena. They were tall and armored, carrying weapons that hummed with energy. One of them reached for her shoulder to remove her insignia. Elena stepped back. "I'll remove it myself." She unpinned the silver star from her shoulder. It felt heavy in her hand. She had worn it for 30 years. Her mother had worn it for 40 years before her. Her grandmother before that. All the way back to Admiral Maria herself. She placed it on a table in front of the Emperor. "I won't serve you anymore, but I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you were warned." The Emperor waved his hand dismissively. "Go." Elena turned and walked out of the chamber. Marcus Chen and the other human representatives followed her. As they walked through the long hallways of the palace, Marcus grabbed her arm. "Elena, what do we do? They don't understand what they've done." "I know," Elena said, "but I can't change their minds. The decision is made." They reached the spaceport where the human transport ship was waiting. It was a small vessel, designed for diplomatic missions. The pilot was already warming up the engines. Before boarding, Elena pulled out her communicator. It was a special one, given only to members of her family. She had never used it before, never needed to. She pressed her thumb against the scanner, and it recognized her DNA. A message prompt appeared. It was asking for confirmation. "Send Protocol 7? It asked. Elena's hand shook slightly. She knew what this meant. Everyone in her family knew. They had trained for it, hoped they would never need it, and prayed this day would never come. She pressed the button. The message was simple. Only 3 words in Old Terran, a language that predated the treaty. A language that most humans didn't even speak anymore, but certain computers still understood it. Certain systems still waited for it. "Wake the fleet." The message encrypted itself and shot out into space, traveling faster than light. It would reach 17 different systems. It would wake up things that had been sleeping for 700 years. Elena boarded the transport. As the ship lifted off from Zarathi Prime, she looked out the window at the capital city below. It was beautiful, full of tall towers and bright lights. She wondered if it would still be standing in a few months. Marcus sat down next to her. "What happens now?" Elena closed her eyes. "Now we remind them why they signed the treaty in the first place." The transport jumped to faster than light speed, leaving the Zarathi homeworld behind. In the darkness of space, no one could see the tears running down Elena's face. She had spent her whole life keeping the peace. Now she would have to prepare for war. The 700-year-old treaty was broken. The compact of blood and stars was ended, and the galaxy was about to remember what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. The signal traveled through space at speeds that broke normal physics. It passed through relay stations that most people didn't know existed. It reached places that had been quiet for centuries. On Mars, deep inside Olympus Mons, the largest mountain in the solar system, something stirred. The mountain wasn't just a mountain. Inside it was a network of tunnels and chambers that went down for miles. At the very bottom, massive doors began to open. They were so large that it took 10 minutes for them to move completely. Dust that had settled for 700 years shook loose and fell like ancient snow. Lights came on, one by one, revealing rows of ships. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. They were enormous, each one the size of a small city. They had been waiting in the dark, their systems in sleep mode, maintained by robots that had never stopped working. Captain Sarah Kim was in her apartment in New Tokyo when her communicator started beeping. It wasn't the normal beep. It was a sound she had heard only in training simulations, a sound that meant everything had changed. She grabbed the device and saw the message. Protocol 7 active. Report to Mars Station immediately. Sarah's hands started shaking. She had been in the Terran Defense Force for 15 years. She flew a small patrol ship, checking mining operations and making sure pirates didn't bother cargo vessels. It was boring work, but it was peaceful. She had never fired her weapons at another ship. Now, as she read the message, she realized her peaceful life was over. All across human space, people were getting the same message. Pilots, engineers, soldiers, strategists, people who had trained for war but never expected to see it. The Terran Defense Force had always seemed like a formality, something humans maintained just in case but never really needed. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, another facility came to life. It was hidden under miles of ice. The fusion reactors that powered it had been in standby mode, using just enough energy to keep from shutting down completely. Now they roared to full power. The ice above began to melt from the heat. Geysers of steam shot into space. Inside the facility, Admiral James Rodriguez received his orders. He was an old man, almost 70, and he had never seen combat. His job had been to maintain the fleet, to keep it ready just in case. He had always thought just in case would never come. He stood in the command center looking at screens that showed ship after ship coming online. Their AI systems were booting up. Their weapons were charging. Their shields were activating. "Sir," said his second-in-command, a young woman named Lieutenant Patel. "What's happening?" "They fired Commander Vasquez," Rodriguez said quietly. Patel's face went pale. Everyone in the Defense Force knew what that meant. They had all studied the treaty. They all knew about the compact. "Dear God," Patel whispered. "They actually did it." "Get me a line to Earth Command," Rodriguez ordered. "And wake up the captains. All of them." Meanwhile, at the edge of the solar system, in the cold darkness of the Oort cloud, weapons platforms began to activate. They were ancient things built during the last war. But they had been upgraded constantly. New weapons were added. New shields were installed. New AI systems were programmed. They hung in space like sleeping giants, and now they were waking up. Back on Earth in Geneva, the Prime Minister was in an emergency meeting. The room was full of military officers and politicians. Everyone looked worried. Ambassador Marcus Chen had arrived from Zarathi Prime just an hour ago. He stood at the front of the room explaining what had happened. "They laughed at us," he said, his voice tired and sad. "I told them about the compact. I warned them. They thought it was a joke." The Minister of Defense, a tall woman named General Morrison, slammed her fist on the table. "Those arrogant fools. Do they have any idea what they've done?" "No," said the Prime Minister, an old man with white hair. "That's the problem. They don't remember. It's been 700 years. To them, we're just merchants and traders. They don't know what we used to be." "What we still are," Morrison corrected him. "We just chose not to show it." The Prime Minister nodded slowly. "How long until the fleet is fully operational?" 3 months for full combat readiness," Morrison answered. "But we'll have enough ships ready in 3 weeks to defend ourselves if they attack first." "Will they attack?" someone asked. Marcus shook his head. "I don't think so. Not immediately. They don't see us as a threat. They think removing Elena was just a political move. They don't understand the consequences." "Then we need to make them understand," the Prime Minister said. "Send a message to Emperor Zeltharax. Tell him he has made a terrible mistake. Tell him to reinstate Commander Vasquez immediately or face the consequences." "They won't listen," Marcus said. "I know," the Prime Minister replied sadly. "But we have to try. We have to give them one more chance." The message was sent. It reached Zarathi Prime within hours. The Emperor read it in his throne room, surrounded by his advisors. The message was simple. "You have broken the compact of blood and stars. This was humanity's promise to keep peace. Without it, we are no longer bound by the treaty. Reinstate Commander Elena Vasquez immediately, or humanity will consider itself free to act in its own defense. You have seen our merchant ships. You have not seen our warships. You don't want to. Please reconsider your decision." Emperor Zeltharax showed the message to his military advisor, General Corax. Corax read it and laughed. "Threats from humans?" he said. "Your Majesty, we have 10 million warships. They have maybe a few thousand patrol vessels. This message is desperation." "Perhaps," the Emperor said, but he felt a small worry in his chest. Something about the message bothered him. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't angry. It was sad. Like someone warning a child not to touch a hot stove. "Send our intelligence ships," the Emperor ordered. "I want to know what the humans are doing. Watch their military installations. Report any unusual activity." The intelligence ships went out. What they found confused them. Human merchant ships all across the galaxy were returning home, thousands of them, abandoning trade routes, leaving contracts unfulfilled. They weren't running away. They were organizing. They were going back to human space in a coordinated pattern. The Zarathi intelligence officers sent reports back to the Emperor. The reports showed something else strange. Economic models predicted that the human withdrawal would cause massive problems. It turned out that human trade networks were essential to the galaxy's economy. Without human ships carrying goods between systems, trade would slow down significantly. "How did we not notice this before?" the Emperor asked. "They did it slowly over centuries," Corax explained. "They made themselves useful. Necessary, it was probably intentional. The Emperor felt that worry grow stronger. More reports came in. Human space stations were powering up additional reactors. Mining operations were increasing production. Shipyards that normally built cargo vessels were now building something else. The intelligence officers couldn't get close enough to see what one intelligence ship did. Managed to get close to Mars. It took scans of Olympus Mons. The sensors detected massive amounts of energy coming from inside the mountain. Energy levels that didn't make sense for a civilian installation. The ship tried to get closer to investigate. That's when the mountain opened up. The Zarathi crew watched in horror as ships began to emerge. Not small patrol vessels, massive warships, each one larger than their intelligence vessel. They had weapons that the Zarathi sensors couldn't identify. They had armor that seemed impossibly thick. The intelligence ship ran away, jumping to faster than light speed as quickly as possible. When the report reached Emperor Zeltharax, he finally understood that something was very wrong. "How many ships came out of that mountain?" he asked. "We counted 50 before we had to retreat, Your Majesty," the intelligence officer said. But the mountain was still opening. There could be hundreds more, maybe thousands. The Emperor looked at General Corax. "You said they only had patrol vessels." Corax had no answer. Elena Vasquez arrived at Sanctuary Station 3 days after leaving Zarathi Prime. The station was old, built during the first wave of human space exploration. It orbited a small planet in a system far from any trade routes. Most people had forgotten it existed, but Elena knew about it. Her family had always known. She walked through corridors that hadn't seen visitors in decades. At the center of the station was a room with a single pedestal. On the pedestal was a hand scanner. Elena placed her hand on it. The scanner analyzed her DNA, her fingerprints, her genetic code. It compared them to records stored in its memory. "Records 700 years old. Identity confirmed," a computer voice said. "Elena Maria Vasquez, descendant of Admiral Maria Vasquez. Welcome, Commander." The room came alive with light. Holographic screens appeared, showing star maps and ship deployments. And in the center of it all, a hologram of a woman appeared. She looked like Elena. Same dark hair, same sharp eyes, same strong jaw, but she wore an old military uniform from 700 years ago. "Hello, Elena," the hologram said. "I'm Admiral Maria Vasquez. If you're seeing this message, then the peace has failed. I'm sorry. I hoped this day would never come." Elena felt tears in her eyes as she looked at her ancient ancestor. "Now you must do what I prayed none of our blood would ever have to do." The hologram continued. "You must remind the galaxy why they feared us." Emperor Zeltharax sat in his war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the galaxy. Red markers indicated human military activity. There were far more red markers than there should have been. "They've been hiding this the whole time," General Corax said, staring at the displays. "Every civilian station has weapons. Every colony has defense systems. Every merchant ship can convert to military use within hours. How is this possible?" the Emperor demanded. "We have inspectors. We have treaties that limit military buildup. The treaties allow self-defense installations," Corax explained. "The humans just made sure that everything they built could serve dual purposes. A mining laser becomes a weapon. A power reactor designed for a city can power a shield generator. They've been preparing for this for centuries, hiding it in plain sight." The Emperor felt anger rising in his chest. He had been made to look like a fool. Worse, he had actually been a fool. The humans had played a game for 700 years and he hadn't even known he was a player. "What are our military analysts saying?" he asked. Corax hesitated before answering. "They say that even if human technology is 700 years old, it might still be dangerous. The humans were already advanced during the last war. If they've been upgrading their systems this whole time, then we have a problem," the Emperor finished. "But Your Majesty," said Admiral Thex, the commander of the Imperial fleet, "even if their individual ships are powerful, they can't have many of them. We have 10 million warships. Numbers will win." The Emperor thought about this. "How many ships do the humans have?" "Intelligence estimates between 5 and 10,000 combat vessels," Thex answered. "We outnumber them 1,000 to 1. Then we make an example," the Emperor decided. "Choose a human border colony. Send enough ships to conquer it completely. Show the humans that their hidden weapons don't matter. Show them that they can't win." Thex smiled. "It will be done, Your Majesty." The target chosen was New Hebrides, a human colony on the edge of their territory. It had a population of 2 million people. It was important enough to send a message, but not so important that destroying it would make the Empire look too cruel. Admiral Thex assembled a fleet of 50,000 warships. It was massive overkill. The fleet could have conquered most civilizations in the galaxy with that many ships. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, traveling toward New Hebrides. It would take 3 days to arrive. On New Hebrides, the evacuation began as soon as the warning came. Commander Vasquez had sent messages to all human colonies. Get your people to safety. The military would handle the fighting. Transport ships arrived by the hundreds, loading civilians. Children clutched their toys. Parents packed whatever they could carry. Old people looked sad, leaving homes they had lived in for decades. But they all went peacefully. They trusted their military to protect them. They trusted Commander Vasquez. Within 2 days, New Hebrides was empty. The city stood quiet. The farms had no one working in them. The streets had no cars moving through them. The only thing that remained in orbit was a single ship. It was enormous. The size of a small moon, its hull was dark gray, covered in what looked like old battle scars. Strange symbols were painted on its side in white. UNS Unbroken Promise, DNT-01. When the Zarathi fleet arrived, they saw this single ship waiting for them. Admiral Thex looked at it on his command screen. He had never seen a human warship before. He had to admit it was impressive, but it was just one ship against 50,000. Scan it, he ordered. The scanning officer worked at his console, then looked up in confusion. Sir, the scans aren't working properly. I'm getting strange readings. The ship's hull is made of something our sensors can't identify. I can't tell you how many weapons it has or how strong its shields are. It doesn't matter, Thex said. Open a communication channel. The face that appeared on the screen made Thex pause. It was Commander Elena Vasquez. She sat in a command chair on the bridge of the massive ship. Behind her, he could see dozens of crew members working at stations. The bridge was huge, like a cathedral. I am Admiral Thex of the Zarathi Imperial Fleet, he announced. You are ordered to surrender your ship immediately. Elena looked at him with tired eyes. Admiral, turn your fleet around, go home. No one needs to die today, Thex laughed. You have one ship. I have 50,000. Surrender now and we will spare your life. You were warned, Elena said quietly. You were told what would happen if you broke the compact. You didn't listen. What happens next is your fault, not mine. Last chance, Thex said. Surrender or be destroyed. Elena's face showed no emotion. You first, Thex cut the communication. All ships, attack formation. Target that vessel.
Fire everything!
50,000 warships moved into position, their weapons powered up. Energy cannons, missile launchers, plasma torpedoes. Enough firepower to destroy a planet. They all fired at once. The space around the Unbroken Promise lit up like a sun. Explosions filled the void. Energy beams, missiles, and projectiles slammed into the ship from every direction. The light faded. Thex waited to see debris, waited to see the destroyed pieces of the human ship floating in space. Instead, the Unbroken Promise sat there, completely undamaged. Not a scratch on it. Not a dent. Nothing. What? Thex whispered. Sir. The scanning officer shouted. Their shields just absorbed everything. I've never seen shield technology like this. The energy from our weapons just disappeared. Fire again, Thex ordered. Keep firing. The fleet fired again, and again, and again. The Unbroken Promise sat in the middle of a firestorm that should have destroyed anything. It didn't even move. Then it fired back. A single weapon activated on the human ship. It was a cannon on the front of the vessel. It glowed with a strange purple light. The light shot out toward the Zarathi fleet. It wasn't a beam. It wasn't a missile. It was something else. A ball of darkness that moved through space, bending the light around it. When it hit the first line of Zarathi ships, they simply ceased to exist. Not exploded, not destroyed. They just disappeared, like they had never been there. 100 ships gone in an instant. The ball of darkness continued through the fleet. It curved and moved like it was alive, touching ship after ship. Each one vanished. What is that thing? Thex screamed. It's a compressed singularity, sir, the science officer answered, his voice shaking. They're firing miniature black holes at us. The Unbroken Promise fired again, and again. Each shot took out hundreds of ships. The Zarathi fleet tried to run, but the singularities were fast. They chased down fleeing vessels and consumed them. Thex watched his fleet die. In 4 minutes, 50,000 warships were reduced to debris. Only his command ship remained, because Elena had spared it deliberately. His communication panel beeped. Elena's face appeared again. "Are you listening now, Admiral?" she asked. Thex couldn't speak. He just nodded. "This was humanity being merciful," Elena said. "This was one ship. One old ship using technology from 700 years ago, running on low power. We have thousands of ships like this. We have weapons you can't imagine. We gave you peace and you threw it away for pride and prejudice." She leaned forward in her chair. "Go back to your Emperor. Tell him what you saw here. Tell him that this is his last warning. Reinstate me, apologize to humanity, and maybe we can stop this before more people die. Or don't, and see what happens when we stop being merciful." The communication ended. The unbroken promise turned and jumped to faster than light speed, disappearing in a flash of light. Admiral Thex sat in his command chair, surrounded by the debris of his fleet. He was crying. He had been in the Zarathi military for 40 years. He had fought in a dozen battles. He had never been afraid before. Now he was terrified. When Thex returned to Zarathi Prime, he went directly to the Emperor. The throne room was full of advisors and officials. They all looked at him expectantly, waiting to hear about his great victory. "Your Majesty," Thex said, his voice hoarse, "I have failed. My fleet is destroyed. 50,000 ships are gone." The room erupted in shocked voices. The Emperor stood up from his throne. "Destroyed? By one human ship?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Thex said. "They have weapons we can't defend against, shields we can't penetrate, technology that makes our fleet look like children's toys." General Korak stepped forward. "This is impossible. No single ship can destroy 50,000 vessels." "I watched it happen," Thex shouted. "I saw my ships disappear. They fired black holes at us." "Black holes? Do you understand? They weaponized the most destructive force in the universe, and they did it 700 years ago." The Emperor sat back down slowly. His face had lost its purple color. He looked pale and sick. "What have we done?" he whispered. An old advisor, one who had served the Emperor's father, stepped forward. He was ancient, his scales faded with age. "Your Majesty, I must speak," he said. "I was alive at the end of the last war. I was just a child, but I remember. I remember the human ships appearing in our skies. I remember my father crying because he thought we would all die. I remember when Admiral Maria Vasquez offered us peace instead of destruction." He looked around the room. The humans could have wiped us out. Instead, they offered us a treaty. They offered us their protection. They became our friends. And we just spat in their face. The Emperor closed his eyes. "How do we fix this?" Emperor Zeltharax made his choice. Pride won over wisdom. "Mobilize everything," he commanded. "Every warship, every soldier, every weapon. We will crush humanity with sheer numbers. They cannot fight the entire might of the Zarathi Empire." General Korax tried to object. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should reconsider." "No," the Emperor roared. "I will not bow to humans. I will not apologize for doing what was right. They are beneath us, and we will prove it." The order went out across the Empire. 5 million warships began moving toward human space. It was the largest military fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Ships from 1,000 worlds, crews of 100 different species serving the Empire, all of them heading toward one target. The armada was so large that it took 2 weeks just to organize. Ships had to be grouped into fleets, commanders assigned, supply lines established. The logistics alone were a nightmare, but the Empire was determined. On Earth, Commander Vasquez watched the enemy fleet gather. Satellites and monitoring stations tracked every ship movement. The numbers were staggering. 5 million warships, Admiral Rodriguez said, looking at the display. "Even with our technology, that's a lot of firepower coming our way." "They'll hit the outer defense perimeter first," Elena said, pointing to the holographic map. "That's where we'll make our stand." The outer defense perimeter was a sphere of weapons platforms surrounding all of human territory. It had been built 700 years ago, placed in the cold darkness at the edge of human space. Most people had forgotten it existed, but the platforms had never stopped working. AI systems had maintained them. Upgrades had been installed remotely. New weapons had been added. What started as primitive defense stations had become something terrifying. There were 10,000 platforms spread across the perimeter. Each one was the size of a large building. Each one had shields, weapons, and an AI smart enough to fight on its own. Captain Sarah Kim was assigned to Platform 247. She had arrived 3 days ago with a crew of 20 people. Their job wasn't to operate the platform. The AI could do that on its own. Their job was to supervise to make sure nothing went wrong and to override the AI if necessary. Sarah stood in the command center, looking at the screens showing empty space. Soon that space would be filled with enemy ships. "Captain," said Lieutenant Chen, her second in command, "the AI wants to know if we should activate combat protocols." "Do it," Sarah ordered. "Wake everything up." The platform came alive. Weapons that had been dormant for centuries powered up. Shields activated, creating invisible barriers around the station. Sensors reached out into space, scanning for approaching threats. "All weapons ready, Captain," Chen reported. "Kinetic batteries, laser arrays, missile pods, and, wow, we have antimatter torpedoes. I've only seen those in history books." "History is about to repeat itself," Sarah said quietly. Across the perimeter, 9,999 other platforms were doing the same thing. Human crews watched their screens and waited. The Zarathi Armada arrived in waves. The first wave consisted of 500,000 ships. They jumped into the outer edge of human space, their sensors searching for targets. They found the platforms immediately. Admiral Kex, commanding the first wave, looked at his tactical display. 10,000 targets appeared, spread across a massive area. They were space stations of some kind, old and primitive looking. "Those must be their defense platforms," Kex said. "They're ancient. This will be easy. All ships, attack formation." 500,000 warships moved toward the platforms. They locked weapons and prepared to fire. The platforms fired first. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The platforms didn't just shoot at the nearest targets. They coordinated with each other, sharing information faster than light through quantum communication systems. They predicted where each enemy ship would be, calculated optimal firing solutions, and struck with perfect accuracy. Kinetic weapons launched metal slugs at incredible speeds. When a slug traveling at 90% of light speed hit a ship, it didn't matter how thick the armor was, the ship exploded. Laser arrays upgraded with modern focusing technology sliced through shields like they weren't there. Antimatter torpedoes tracked fleeing vessels, pursuing them with relentless precision. But the most terrifying weapons were the kinetic barriers. These weren't shields that stopped energy. These were fields that made matter behave differently. When a Zarathi missile entered the field around a platform, it simply stopped moving. The kinetic energy that should have propelled it forward disappeared. The missile hung in space, harmless, until the platform's point defense lasers destroyed it. Admiral Kex watched his fleet die around him. Ships exploded by the hundreds, by the thousands. His commanders were screaming for orders, but he had no orders to give. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this. "Fall back," he finally shouted. "All ships retreat!" The ships that could still move jumped to faster than light speed, fleeing the battle. Of the 500,000 ships in the first wave, only 70,000 escaped. Captain Sarah Kim watched the retreating enemy vessels on her screen. Platform 247 had destroyed 200 ships by itself. She felt sick. 200 ships meant thousands of dead crew members. Thousands of people who would never go home. But they had attacked first. She had to remember that. "Good work, everyone," she said to her crew. "Get ready. They'll be back." And they were. The Emperor, hearing about the disaster, sent another wave. 1,000,000 ships this time. They approached more carefully, trying to stay out of range of the platforms, but range didn't matter. The human weapons could hit targets from millions of miles away. The platforms picked off ships with mechanical efficiency. The AI systems didn't get tired. They didn't panic. They just calculated, targeted, and fired. This time, 300,000 ships escaped. The Battle of the Ort Line, as it would be called, lasted for 3 weeks. The Zarathi Empire kept sending waves of ships, and the human platforms kept destroying them. It was methodical. It was brutal. It was one-sided. Finally, the Empire changed tactics. They decided to bypass the platforms and strike directly at human worlds. A fleet of 2 million warships, led by Admiral Thex himself, jumped past the perimeter. They headed straight for Mars, hoping to destroy humanity's ship production facilities. They ran into the First Fleet. The First Fleet was humanity's original armada from the war 700 years ago. These were the ships that had fought the Zarathi Empire to a standstill. Ships with names like Righteous Fury, Last Warning, Mercy's End, and Terrible Swiftsword. They had been modernized. New weapons installed, new shields added, new engines that made them faster than anything the Zarathi had. But they kept their original names because those names meant something. Those names were a reminder. Admiral Rodriguez commanded from the flagship Maria's Legacy. It was named after the admiral who had won the first war and negotiated the peace. Now her descendant was commanding it in a second war. All ships combat formation, Rodriguez ordered. Let's show them why these names still scare people. The first fleet had only 500 ships. They were outnumbered 4,000 to 1, but they didn't hesitate. They accelerated toward the enemy armada at speeds that should have been impossible. Admiral Thex saw them coming. 500 ships against 2 million. He almost felt sorry for them. Then the battle started, and he stopped feeling sorry for anything except himself. The human ships moved like they were dancing. They dodged incoming fire with perfect timing. Their shields absorbed hits that should have destroyed them. And their weapons. Their weapons were nightmares, antimatter torpedoes that could crack moons, energy cannons that fired beams hot enough to melt through any armor. Fighters launched from carrier ships piloted by AI so sophisticated they could predict enemy movements before they happened. But the most devastating weapon was the quantum disruptors. These weapons didn't destroy ships in a conventional way. They disrupted the quantum bonds holding matter together. A ship hit by a quantum disruptor didn't explode. It just fell apart into its component atoms like someone had cut all the strings holding it together. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, Rodriguez's fleet had lost 15 ships. Thex's fleet had lost everything. 2 million warships reduced to debris and scattered atoms. Thex himself survived because Rodriguez led him. His command ship was damaged but intact, its crew alive. Rodriguez opened a communication channel. "Admiral Thex," Rodriguez said. His voice was tired. "You lost a fleet at New Hebrides. Now you've lost another one here. How many more fleets do you need to lose before your emperor understands?" Thex looked at the old human admiral. "We still have 3 million ships. We will keep coming." "I know," Rodriguez said sadly. "And we'll keep destroying them." "Your ships are good, Admiral. Your crews are brave. But you're fighting with technology that's centuries behind ours. This isn't a war. It's a slaughter. Please make your emperor see reason." The communication ended. Thex's damaged ship limped back to Zarathi space. Over the next 3 months, the pattern repeated. The Empire sent fleets. Humanity destroyed them. Every battle was one-sided. Every battle showed the massive gap in technology and training. The Empire's forces weren't incompetent. They were brave and determined, but they were fighting an opponent they couldn't beat. The Galactic Council chamber looked different than it had 3 months ago. The walls were the same crystal reflecting starlight. The seats were arranged the same way. But everything felt changed. Emperor Zeltharax entered the chamber slowly. He looked older now, his scales dull, his movements tired. Behind him walked what remained of his advisors. The ones who had encouraged him to fire Commander Vasquez were no longer with him. Some had resigned. Others had been dismissed. The chamber was full. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy had come to witness this moment. They sat in silence, watching the Emperor walk to the center of the room. Commander Elena Vasquez stood waiting for him. She wore her uniform again, the one they had taken from her. The silver star was back on her shoulder. Behind her stood the human delegation, including Ambassador Marcus Chen and Admiral Rodriguez. The Emperor stopped in front of Elena. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then slowly the Emperor knelt. It was a shocking sight. The ruler of the largest empire in the galaxy, kneeling before a human woman. "Commander Vasquez," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "On behalf of the Zarathi Empire, I offer our formal apology. I made a grave error in judgment. I let prejudice and pride cloud my thinking. I removed you from your position unjustly, and in doing so I broke the compact of blood and stars. The deaths, the destruction, the suffering, all of it is my fault. I take full responsibility." Elena looked down at the kneeling Emperor. She felt no satisfaction in this moment, no sense of victory, only sadness for all the lives lost because of one bad decision. "Stand up, Your Majesty," she said quietly. "Let's talk about how to fix this." The Emperor stood, and they moved to a table where the treaty documents waited. Diplomats and legal experts from both sides had worked for weeks on these documents. Now it was time to make them official. Ambassador Chen read the terms aloud so everyone could hear. First, the Zarathi Empire issues a formal apology to Commander Elena Vasquez and all of humanity for breaking the Compact of Blood and Stars. This apology will be recorded in all official histories and taught in all schools throughout the Empire. The Emperor nodded his agreement. Second, the Empire will pay reparations, not in money but in service. Zarathi engineers and workers will help rebuild any human facilities damaged during the conflict. They will also assist in humanitarian projects throughout human space for the next 50 years. The Emperor nodded again. It was a fair punishment. Work, not wealth. Service, not gold. Third, the Empire will release all subjugated species currently under Imperial control. These species will be given the choice to remain as equal partners in a new federation or to become independent nations. The age of conquest is over. This caused murmurs throughout the chamber. Many species had been under Zarathi control for centuries. The idea of freedom was almost unbelievable to them. Fourth, humanity will establish the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Commander Elena Vasquez will serve as its first commander-in-chief. This force will not conquer or control. Its purpose is to prevent any species from making the same mistakes the Empire made, to ensure that power is not abused, to protect the weak from the strong. Elena stepped forward to address the chamber. "I want to make something clear," she said, her voice firm but not angry. "Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want tribute. We don't want to be feared. What we want is simple. Respect. Respect for all species regardless of their size or power. Respect for individuals regardless of their gender or origin." She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many representatives as she could. 700 years ago, my ancestor ended a terrible war. She offered peace because she understood the true cost of conflict. She knew that victory meant nothing if it came at the price of billions of lives. She made a compact, sealed with her bloodline, to keep humanity from ever starting another war. Elena touched the silver star on her shoulder. "For 7 centuries, my family kept that promise. We were the lock on humanity's weapons, the seal on their anger. And when that seal was broken, not because of any threat or attack, but because of prejudice, well, you all saw what happened." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We showed you our weapons. We showed you our power. We showed you what humanity is capable of when pushed. But here's what I want you to remember. We chose not to use this power for 700 years. We chose peace over conquest, cooperation over domination, and we're making that choice again now." The chamber was completely silent. Even the usual whispers and movements had stopped. "The Galactic Peacekeeping Force will have teeth," Elena continued. "It will have the power to enforce peace, to stop aggression, to protect the innocent. But it will also have limits. It will answer to a council of all major species. It will operate with transparency. And it will never ever be used for conquest." She looked directly at the Emperor. "Your Majesty, you made a mistake. A terrible one. But you have the courage to admit it and make amends. That's worth something. Humanity accepts your apology. We accept your terms, and we offer you a place in the new order we're building. Not as subjects, not as servants, as partners, as equals." The Emperor bowed his head. "Thank you, Commander. The Zarathi Empire accepts these terms. We will honor them." The documents were signed, first by the Emperor, then by Elena, then by representatives from 50 other species who witnessed the agreement. When it was done, the chamber erupted in applause. Not celebratory applause, but relieved applause. The war was over. Peace had returned. But it was a different kind of peace than before. The old peace had been based on everyone forgetting what humanity could do. The new peace was based on everyone remembering it, and humanity choosing not to do it. The treaty included one final provision, written in both modern Common and ancient Old Terran. Elena had insisted on it. The words were carved into a crystal monument placed in the center of the council chamber. "Let it be known across all stars and all time. Humanity extends its hand in friendship to all sapient beings. We offer protection, technology, and partnership. We ask only for respect in return. We are the children of old Earth, survivors of our own darkest hours. We learn to value peace not because we fear war, but because we know its true cost. We are strong not to dominate, but to protect. We are armed not to conquer, but to defend. Remember this, and peace will last. Forget this, and you will be reminded. 10 years passed, then 20, then 50. The Galactic Peacekeeping Force became a respected institution. They stopped 3 attempted genocides. They prevented 2 major wars. They helped negotiate peace between species that had been enemies for millennia, and they did it all without conquering anyone. Commander Elena Vasquez served for 25 years before retiring. On her last day in command, representatives from across the galaxy came to honor her. Even the Zarathi Empire sent a delegation, led by Emperor Zeltharax's grandson who had grown up learning about his grandfather's mistake. "Commander Vasquez," the young emperor said, "my grandfather made me promise to say something to you before you retired. He wanted you to know that removing you from command was the worst decision of his life, but your response to it, your mercy and wisdom, taught him and our entire species a lesson we desperately needed to learn." Elena smiled. "Your grandfather was a good man who made a bad decision, but he had the courage to admit it and change. That's all any of us can do." She passed command to her daughter, Captain Maria Vasquez, named after their famous ancestor. Maria was younger than Elena had been, but she was ready. She understood the responsibility of the name she carried. At the ceremony, Maria gave her first speech as the new commander of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. "My family has been keeping humanity's promise for over 700 years, she said. "We've been the seal on our people's strength, the lock on our weapons, the reminder of what we can do and why we choose not to. This responsibility doesn't end with me. It will pass to my children, and their children and beyond. As long as there's a Vasquez, there's someone who remembers, someone who understands, someone who will do what's right even when it's hard." She looked out at the assembled representatives. "But here's the thing. This responsibility isn't just ours anymore. It belongs to all of you. Every species in this chamber has power. Every species can choose peace or war. Every species must remember what we almost lost 3 decades ago. We almost lost everything because one person made one prejudiced decision. Let's never let that happen again." The applause was genuine and warm. The galaxy had learned its lesson. 50 years after the war, Elena Vasquez was old. She lived on Earth in a small house near the ocean. Her grandchildren visited often, playing in the garden while she watched from her porch. One day she received a visitor. It was Ambassador Marcus Chen, also old now, also retired. He sat with her on the porch and they watched the waves together. "Did you ever think it would work out this well?" Marcus asked. Elena was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I was terrified. When I sent that message, 'Wake the fleet,' I thought it would be the end of everything. I thought we'd have to destroy the Empire completely. But you didn't." "No," Elena agreed. "We didn't. We showed them we could, but we didn't. That's the difference between power and wisdom. Power is being able to destroy your enemies.